somewhere in your life, you learned that the loudest person in the room wins, the one who explains fastest, the one who defends himself the hardest, the one who never lets an insult pass without an answer. You learned this so early, you never questioned it, and it has been costing you power every single day since. Because there is a truth almost nobody tells you. A truth one of the most dangerous minds in the history of philosophy understood better than almost anyone who ever lived. His reputation on being agreeable, he built it on being unbearable to ignore, and the strange part is this. The sentences of his that traveled the farthest, the ones still quoted 2 centuries later, were not the ones where he explained everything. They were the ones where he said less than expected, where he let the silence do the cutting. What if the real weapon was never the words at all? What if it was what you refused to say, stay with this, because by the end you will not be able to look at a conversation, an insult, or an argument the same way again. Almost nobody understands this. Not really. They think they do. They nod along to quotes about strength and solitude, print them on pictures of mountains, and move on with their day having changed nothing. But was not writing decoration, he was writing a warning. He lived in a century obsessed with argument, with rhetoric, with the idea that the man who talks the most convincingly wins the room. And he watched that obsession quietly destroy people from the inside. He watched brilliant minds burn themselves out defending positions nobody even remembered attacking. He watched reputations bleed to death one reactive sentence at a time. And somewhere in that observation he found something colder and far more useful. He understood that a mind is measured not by what it says, but by what it can afford to leave unsaid. That single idea, if you actually absorb it, will change how people treat you. But to understand why, we have to go back to where it started. Because Nietzsche did not arrive at this by accident. He was by nearly every account a man surrounded by noise he could not escape. Public accusations, academic betrayals, a philosophical world that mocked him while he was alive and only worshipped him once he was gone. He watched his ideas twisted by people who never understood them, watched former friends turn into public enemies, watched his name dragged through arguments he never asked to be part of. And here is the detail almost nobody talks about. He rarely answered, not because he had nothing to say. Nietzsche had more to say than almost anyone in his era. But he understood something that most people never learn until it's too late. That answering every attack is not strength, it's leakage. Every reactive word is energy escaping a container that could have held pressure, held mystery, held power. But this still doesn't explain the most dangerous part of what he discovered, because silence on its own means nothing. A man who says nothing out of fear is not powerful, he is simply afraid. The silence that Nietzsche is describing is not the silence of the timid. It is something colder, something almost predatory. It is the silence of someone who understands exactly what is happening and chooses deliberately not to give you the reaction you are hungry for. Think about the last time someone insulted you and you said nothing. Not because you had no comeback, because you decided the comeback wasn't worth the coin. Do you remember what happened in their face, that flicker of confusion, that brief uncomfortable silence where they expected a fight and got nothing back? That flicker is not an accident. That is the exact moment Nietzsche is talking about. The moment where control quietly changes hands. But here is where it gets uncomfortable. because this is not really about arguments at all. It goes much deeper than that. Believed that most people talk not to communicate, but to relieve tension. Every defensive sentence, every justification, every let me explain myself is not information. It is a discharge. It is the nervous system trying to empty itself of discomfort as fast as possible. And the moment you discharge that tension in words, you have handed the other person something enormously valuable. Proof that they reached you. Now think about what happens when you don't discharge music. The tension does not disappear. It stays, but now it stays inside you, contained, controlled, and entirely yours. And there is something almost frightening about a person who can hold tension without needing to release it immediately. People sense it before they can explain it. They sense that this is a person who is not run by his own nervous system. And on some unconscious level that reads as dominance, this is where idea about strength starts to look nothing like what you were taught strength looks like. You were taught strength is loud, strength interrupts, strength has the last word, but is pointing at something almost the opposite. That the truly powerful mind does not need the last word, because it was never trying to win the exchange in the first place. It was simply observing it, and an observer cannot lose because an observer was never playing. But if this is true, why does almost nobody live this way? Because it is unbearably uncomfortable. The silence is describing requires you to sit inside an insult, inside an accusation, inside a provocation without emptying the discomfort out of your body immediately. Most people cannot tolerate that for more than a few seconds. The urge to explain, to defend, to correct is almost physical. It feels like an itch demanding to be scratched, and this is the detail almost nobody notices, the one that changes everything once you see it. The people who provoke you the hardest are usually testing exactly this. They are not testing your argument. They are testing your composure. They want to see if they can make the tension escape you, because the moment it does, they know they have found the lever. And once they find the lever, they will pull it again and again in every conversation for years without you even realizing you handed it to them the very first time you couldn't stay quiet. This is the part understood that most philosophy since has quietly forgotten. Silence is not the absence of a response. Silence is a response. It is, in fact, one of the most aggressive responses available because it deprives the other person of the one thing they came for. But we still haven't reached the part that actually explains why this works on such a deep level, because this is not just psychology. It touches something almost primitive in how humans read each other. Think about how animals establish dominance in the wild. It is rarely the loudest, most frantic creature that controls a space. It is the one who does not need to move. Stillness reads as power because stillness signals that nothing in this moment threatens your position enough to require a reaction. A lion does not bark back at every jackal circling it. The moment it did, it would look like it was on the jackal's level. His same principle in human beings, only dressed in language instead of instinct. The mind that reacts to everything is signaling, without realizing it, that everything has power over it. The mind that stays composed, that lets a provocation simply dissolve in silence, is signaling something far more dangerous to the person watching, that they were never the threat they believed themselves to be. And this is exactly why silence unsettles people more than argument ever could. An argument gives them something to push against. Silence gives them nothing, and the human mind is terrified of nothing. It fills silence with imagination, with doubt, with the horrifying possibility that you know something they don't. Now, here is the moment where everything Nietzsche has been building toward finally reveals itself. Because there is a difference between staying silent to avoid conflict and staying silent because you have already decided the outcome does not depend on this conversation. The first is fear wearing the mask of composure. The second is what actually respected. The silence of a mind that has already won the argument internally and simply does not need the external validation of saying so out loud. This is the brutal core of it. Most people are still fighting to be understood. The rare few is describing music have stopped needing to be understood at all. And the moment you stop needing to be understood, nobody can control you through misunderstanding anymore. There is no lever left to pull. But even this is not the deepest layer, because there is one more thing almost nobody notices until it's pointed out directly. Silence does not just protect you from other people, it reveals other people to you. When you stop talking to fill space, you start listening to what is actually happening underneath the words being said to you. You start noticing who talks to convince you and who talks to manipulate you. You start noticing which provocations are accidental and which ones are calculated. Silence turns you from a participant in the noise into someone standing slightly outside it, watching the machinery of every conversation instead of being pulled through it. And once you see the machinery, you can no longer be fooled by it the same way again. This is what meant when he suggested that solitude was not a punishment for the strong mind, but its natural habitat. Not solitude as isolation from people, solitude as distance from the compulsion to explain yourself to everyone who demands it. A mind that can be alone with its own conclusions does not panic when nobody agrees with it. It does not need the room. It does not need the applause. It does not need the last word, and that is precisely why it becomes so hard to control, so hard to provoke, and so hard to forget. Because everyone remembers the person who didn't flinch. Think about every powerful figure you have ever admired in history or in your own life. Chances are it was never the one who explained the most. It was the one whose silence made you wonder what they knew that you didn't. That wondering, that discomfort, that magnetic uncertainty is not an accident. It is the exact mechanism spent his life circling. The mechanism that turns a quiet mind into an unshakable one. So here is the question this leaves you with. The one you should carry into every conversation from today forward. The next time someone provokes you, insults you, tries to pull a reaction out of you like it's owed to them, what will you choose to give them? Because was never about having the sharpest comeback in the room. It was about becoming the kind of mind that no longer needs one. And once you understand that, once you actually feel it settle into how you carry yourself, you will notice something strange starting to happen around you. Rooms grow quieter when you enter them. People choose their words more carefully. Provocations slow down, then stop altogether, because there is no reaction left to hunt for. That is not coincidence. That is the weapon was describing the entire time. Not the sharp word, the one you never needed to say.